Picture this, right? It's 2 a.m., the house is dead silent, the lights are out, and you are just lying there, wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Why? Because your brain has suddenly decided it absolutely must replay a slightly awkward comment you made at like 2 p.m. that afternoon. It's ridiculous, but it's this true cinematic mystery happening right inside our own heads. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the biological blueprint of overthinking. We're going to figure out exactly why our brains get stuck endlessly looping on the smallest, seemingly insignificant things, and how understanding the underlying neurobiology can actually help us finally break free. Let's kick things off with Section 1, the overthinking mystery. We're diving right into a deeply frustrating cycle that, honestly, almost everyone experiences at some point. It's this universal quirk of the human mind, and it almost always starts with something completely mundane. I mean, have you ever found yourself overthinking something tiny? Maybe it was a super brief interaction at the grocery store, or a slightly ambiguous Slack message from a coworker, or just a tiny formatting mistake on a project. Logically, you know it literally does not matter in the grand scheme of things, but you still feel that familiar physiological grip. Your chest tightens up, your focus narrows, and your mind absolutely refuses to let it go. You lock onto this micro-event like a laser.
And when that happens, we end up in this exhausting internal tug-of-war. We have that totally familiar internal monologue where we finally just put our foot down and say, that's it, I'm not going to think about it anymore. We declare this hard-fought victory over our own anxiety, but let's be real, that sense of triumph is usually a total illusion, because literally seconds later, that exact same thought just kicks down the front door of your mind and comes rushing back in, often way louder and more demanding than it was before. The sheer mental energy it takes to fight this battle is just incredibly draining.
If that cycle sounds familiar, there's a fundamental insight you really need to hear right now. The problem is not your willpower. It's really not. It's not a lack of mental strength, and it's not a character flaw. It is actually just a matter of your brain's biological design. This recurring thought loop is a deeply ingrained neurobiological feature. Our brains are essentially these incredible supercomputers, but they were optimized for a completely different era of human history. So we're going to explore exactly what evolutionary psychology tells us about why we're wired this way.
Which brings us to Section 2, the ancient survival blueprint. To truly wrap our heads around overthinking, we actually have to travel back thousands of years. Because here is a fundamental truth about human anatomy. Your brain's absolute first priority is not to make you happy or productive or relaxed. Its number one priority is to keep you alive. Out in the ancient wild, every snapped twig or rustling bush could have meant real physical danger. It could have been a predator. But you might be wondering, why on earth do we overthink social interactions? Well, in an ancient tribe, being outcast or rejected literally meant isolation, which pretty much meant certain death. So, social rejection triggers the exact same biological panic as a physical threat. Fast forward to the modern world, right? We've traded the deadly savanna for the corporate office and the smartphone. Lions have been replaced by other people's opinions. And those predators in the bushes, now they're just vague emails, imaginary fears, and unread social media notifications.
So, neurologically speaking, your brain is basically still running the exact same ancient survival program, just in a totally modern environment. Because of this massive evolutionary mismatch, your brain's threat detection center, the amygdala, treats everyday modern inconveniences as life-threatening dangers. The thing is, it doesn't have a volume control dial. It basically operates on a binary switch. You are either safe or it's life or death. So it reacts to an ambiguous text message by dumping cortisol and adrenaline straight into your bloodstream, firing the exact same physiological alarm bells as it would if you were literally being chased by a bear. This is exactly how anxiety starts. It's why we keep analyzing the smallest things over and over again, because your brain genuinely believes it's keeping you safe from a mortal threat.
Okay, moving on to Section 3, the white elephant paradox. So, if our brains are just sounding these false alarms all the time, why can't we just force the thoughts away? Well, this brings us to a really fascinating foundational concept in psychology called the ironic process theory. Essentially, this principle states that the harder you try to force a thought out of your mind, the stronger it comes back. It's a dual process model. When you try to suppress a thought, your brain creates this intentional operating process to think about something else. But to make sure you aren't thinking about the forbidden topic, it secretly launches a background monitoring process just to check for it.
Actually, instead of just talking about the theory, let's test that background monitoring system in real time. I want you to try something with me right now. Give yourself this super strict command: I will not think about a white elephant. Seriously, try really hard. Push absolutely any thought of a white elephant out of your mind completely.
So, what happened? I can pretty much guarantee that the very first thing that vividly appeared in your mind's eye was a giant white elephant. By commanding your brain to avoid the elephant, your background monitoring system had to continuously ask, wait, am I thinking about a white elephant right now? And in doing that, it constantly pulled that exact concept right back into your working memory. This is exactly why forcing yourself to stop worrying about that awkward grocery store interaction just completely backfires.
The more you run away from a thought, the more it follows you. I really want to emphasize this point just to offer some reassurance here. When you find yourself completely trapped in a relentless cycle of overthinking, it does not mean your mind is broken. Not at all. It simply means your hardware is perfectly intact and functioning exactly according to its ancient specifications. It is running the exact biological system it was built to run.
All right, let's get to the good part. Section 4, breaking the cycle.
So if our brains are basically hardwired to overanalyze for survival, and if pushing thoughts away only triggers that ironic process theory, how in the world do we actually bypass this ancient mental trap? Well, psychology points us toward a really powerful technique called cognitive diffusion. It's essentially about creating a little bit of distance between yourself and your thoughts. First, realize that not every thought deserves your belief. Just because your brain suggests some crazy disaster scenario doesn't mean you actually have to buy into it. Second, not every thought is true. A lot of them are literally just hypothetical risk assessments. And third, thoughts are simply thoughts. Imagine them like passing cars on a highway while you're just standing safely on a bridge watching them go by. The second you stop treating every single anxious feeling as undeniable reality, you completely strip it of its power. You just let it exist without having to interact with it.
And this reveals exactly how highly disciplined, resilient people actually handle their own minds. See, endless rumination only makes fear stronger because it traps you in this theoretical loop where the threat is always just looming over you. Taking action, however, gradually reduces fear. Why? Because action literally forces your brain to process new, reality-based data. When you finally just send that email you've been overthinking for hours, or you sit down to start that daunting project, you provide your amygdala with concrete evidence that, hey, there is no tiger in the room. Successful people feel the exact same fear and negative thoughts that you do, but instead of trying to perfectly control their inner monologue, they just take action despite it, effectively turning off that ancient alarm system through real-world momentum.
So the next time your mind tells you you can't do it, or spirals into a total panic over some minor mistake, I want you to remember this biological blueprint. Do not immediately believe that voice. Reframe that inner critic. It is not some objective truth teller. It's honestly just an overzealous ancient bodyguard trying to keep you safely locked inside your comfort zone. Its primary tool is risk management, not reality. Remember, not every form of ancient protection leads to modern progress.
Which leaves us with this final, vital question to think about. Are you letting your brain's ancient protection prevent your modern progress? Now that you actually understand the mechanics of overthinking, you have a choice. By recognizing those white elephants and those evolutionary false alarms for what they really are, you can choose to step out of that mental loop and take action anyway. Thank you so much for diving into this explainer with me today. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.